Well, I have a cooperative, but
Of course.
on top of that, no, I do believe in I do believe in state control. I mean, I think we already have state control in general in America as well. It's just that the incentive structure revolves around subsidies to mega corporations, and instead of the state executing any sort of centralized planning with with like a multiple decade policy in mind, we're just kind of operating on quarterly returns. Like we're just trying to maximize corporate profit. So there is still a level of state control. There's no true libertarian enterprise in this country or in any country really. Of course, there has to be state control to a certain degree in order to maintain prices, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that there isn't like no state control, but like, are you arguing that like the predominant factor of the economy would be the state control or like the cooperative control? Like,
I think that
are you like someone who would believe that there should be some cooperatives based on markets, or
yeah,
you just eradicate markets entirely?
I like cooperatives, and I think that there is a middle ground with like some market solutions, while still making sure that the state has the public best interest in mind in terms of creating commodities.
Okay. And then here would be my question is what would you then like mandate there either as cooperatives or it's state control? Like if you had the ability to control that?
If I had the ability to control it, would I mandate every single corporation, every single corporate structure to be a cooperative structure?
Or like it would be state controlled, like nationalized.
I think that the government should provide, at least in the interim, the government should provide basic necessities like shelter and become a market competitor, which would be unfair for the market, certainly, with the sole purpose of eventually eradicating certain necessary commodities from the private structure. You can have personal property all day, every day, of course, and even luxury goods or whatever kind of accommodations that you desire. But ultimately, it's more so rent seeking that I'm against. It's more so private uh, private property that I think is not good and creates is at the heart of all of this inequality. But this is stuff that's never going to happen in my lifetime. I don't think. I'm simply trying to move in the direction, at least in the short term, in the direction of modest reforms that genuinely improve people's lives.
So then my thoughts are that like it sounds like your goals are you want to achieve this in the future, but your thoughts are that you were not even close or even at that point at all entirely. So pragmatically, you're just going to end up being like a social democrat.
The way, I mean, yeah, what I advocate for, my most radical perspectives don't come from domestic policy. It's usually my anti-imperialist positions that cause a lot of ire especially in the minds of a lot of Americans. But yeah, as far as domestic policy goes, yeah, I mean, I'm an advocate for nationalized healthcare structure. I'm an advocate for socialized medicine in general, public housing in general. But these are, I would say, relatively modest reforms that exist in one way, shape, or form in other social democracies in Europe, even though they are running into the same problems with the parasitic nature of capital in terms of social democracies basically clawing back all of these social safety nets year over year with austerity measures, with the inevitable goal is privatization, and that is part of the reason why I think that you know I'm, I guess, a little bit more radical in the long term with what I believe. But yes, in the short term, I advocate mostly for modest social democratic proposals.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, it practically in terms of domestic policy sounds like we're like practically on like the same side, and whatnot. Obviously, like that's why like we pretty much agree in terms of all like the policies and the people that we support and stuff. But I feel like a lot of leftists get really focused on like everyone agreeing on like those like sort of I don't want to call them fringe economically related issues, but they're like it's really like definitions and stuff. It's not like we don't pragmatically disagree. We get really focused on like, oh, we have that type of disagreement when we're in reality arguing, at least in the time period, for the same thing.
Yeah. Well, the reasons for why I advocate for these things might be a little different than yours. Aside from like genuinely improving people's lives, and this is another thing that I'm not like secretive about, but I see a noticeable lack of class consciousness in the American working class in general. There is tremendous class consciousness for capital owners, whether they even recognize it or not, and they don't even need to have class consciousness because the system is structured to benefit their needs regardless, and to continue their position as generating engaging in capital accumulation. The entire system is designed in that way, but the reasons as to why I think it's important to be able to do this is because I want labor unions and labor militancy to at least exist in this country, so that there is a valid mechanism of pushback against politicians on the Republican side of the spectrum, certainly, but even on the Democratic side as well. Because I think there's never been a moment throughout American history or history at all where concessions were given to the working class, whether it be the fucking weekends or whether it be paid leave or any of those things, or the abolition of child labor, without real labor militancy. That has simply never happened. And the same goes for social struggles as well. Same goes for civil rights. Like, militancy is an absolute necessity. And I see the American working class as completely removed from that conversation, where they just understandably see themselves as powerless in this structure. And I think that breeds resentment, hostility, and it creates, paired up with the economic volatility that many Americans experience, that creates a perfect ground for right-wing reactionary fascist movements to grow. And that's what we're seeing in America.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree with that. So I'm not as educated on economics as Parker is. But what I will say is, seemingly that's compatible with like a social democrat model to like advocate for more class consciousness, to like get more social reform, better programs for individuals and like the low middle class, and create economic policy in which centers the average citizen or constituent of a country compared to those who have the most money. But I will say, maybe the more we advocate for class consciousness, the more I educate myself on, like this paradigm of conflicts between, classes of wealth and how to effectively resolve them. Maybe that just naturally leads you down this pathway of becoming just completely radicalized socialists,
But I don't think I joke and I say like, yeah, I have radical beliefs, but like, I mean, what's the saying?
I'm sorry, that was a play on words. I was joking too.
No. It's by no measure of mental wellness to be well adjusted to a completely insane society. Like, think about it that way, where advocacy for socialized medicine is seen as a bridge too far for many Americans who are so heavily propagandized, no matter how brilliant they fancy themselves to be. The independent thinkers who think that like social medicine means like, oh, we're going to do Venezuela style rat eating in America or whatever the fuck, right? So like, I wouldn't necessarily say it's radicalization, more so an evolution by recognizing the understandable contradictions that are baked into capitalism. Because capitalism was an advancement from the previous mode of commodity production, for sure. But most of even what Marx talks about in terms of capitalism is not necessarily, attacking capitalism at all, but instead simply describing capitalism with dialectics, like through the assessment of, and you might think it's a little bit reductive at this point, but like through an assessment of like capital accumulators, the capital owners, the bourgeoisie, and the workers that are wage laborers in general, the proletariat. So that's just, it's more so a description of how things are, and not necessarily like moralizing a certain position that like, workers are always good, or they always do the right things or anything like that. There's no good bad dynamics there at all, and instead it's just about describing how capital is accumulated.
Dean just got hit with a.
I'm having some
missile.
technical difficulties.
Yeah, hit with technical.
Got hit with a meteor, dude.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts
I don't
on
understand how glorious Xi Jinping's application TikTok would do this right as I'm talking about abolishing the commodity form.
He's gone. He's getting banned.
yeah, I guess where I'm coming from, and I'm coming from someone who used to be a socialist myself for a pretty long time, and I actually started my whole content creation like creating like leftist and socialist content, is that like a lot of these issues that exist, I think, can be solved with social democracy. And a lot of people say that there's like issues with social democracy. It starts to corrupt. People start to fight and advocate against it. But I don't think that's a critique against social democracy in of itself. I think that just means that you just need to maintain social democracy in the same type of way like we maintain our democracy.
Well, man,
I feel like that's
social democracy hasn't been tried.
well, I mean, like we could say that like we don't think that this real certain form has been tried, and I think that it's cool, but like my argument would then be is that we'd have to try it on smaller levels to be able to see whether or not it works on a larger form in order to be able to say that like it's actually effective. I don't think we'd be able to say that we should adopt it on some sort of globalized production model if it is the case that we don't have any type of level of actual probabilistic means of demonstrating how likely it is that it's going to be beneficial for workers or for people, because we could actually like hurt some of our concerns like, oh, quality of life for workers, if we don't take that into account when we're like applying these sorts of systems, if we don't know what the empirical effect is of these different types of theoretical models. Not to say that theoretical models can't be then used or seen to be effective later on, but it's like we just need evidence to indicate that these particular models are effective before we establish it on such a pragmatic basis worldwide, is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we're not getting there anytime soon anyway. I'm not saying like tomorrow with a magic wand we are going to dissolve the class structure and live in a moneyless, classless, stateless society. You know?
Yeah, my thoughts even then, like, would even a stateless society be, like, desirable in the future? Like, even if we hit, like, full automation. Sorry, I don't want to, like, full-on socialist debate you, but, like, even if we hit full automation, like, would it even be desirable for us to get rid of that? Like, because we still want a state to, like, limit people from committing crimes, right?
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. I'm not a communist. So I think that, like, I can't even imagine what that would look like in general. But the way I explain it is like, I'm not opposed to it. You know, I wouldn't say I'm a communist, but I wouldn't say that I'm opposed to a stateless, moneyless society, a borderless society.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you be against like the enforcement of certain types of laws? Like once we meet that society, I feel like in a communist society, there's no government that would enforce laws against like pedophilia. I feel like that would be true, right?
No, yes, obviously. That's why I'm saying I'm not a communist. But if society evolved in a way where we're talking so far out there, like we're now talking about theoretically what it would look like, right? We're basically fantasizing about a world that is from where I'm standing impossible to imagine. But I think like the argument, I guess, would be that one, obviously most crime in general, with the exception of like antisocial personality disorder related crimes, are like psychopathy or sociopathy, like things like that, crimes born out of crimes that might be born out of like mental problems. And not to say that like people with mental health issues are criminals or whatever. I'm not saying that at all. But with the exception of those, like most crime is done because of financial circumstances, like your material conditions create a likelihood for you to go out and do crime. And I think the argument there is that like in that structure, it's already all of your needs are addressed anyway. So the only remaining crime would possibly be, like you said, pedophilia, which I guess at that stage, medical advancements would have found a solution for that as well. Like I'm assuming that's what it would look like if I were to envision a communist society. So the concept of crime in and of itself would be entirely destroyed, considering that the overwhelming majority of crime is born out of material conditions.
I mean, you could also just appeal to some libertarian enforcement mechanism, right? Don't forget those. Don't forget those collectives, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a libertarian by any means. So, and that's part. Like, I'm a state enjoyer. I often, especially in this past month, I've been talking quite a bit about how we should have a million more government employees. I think it's fucking ridiculous that we're trying to cut government employees rather than hire more people for the government. I think that's that's one of the biggest problems in America is that we don't have enough people doing jobs in general. Any area, like I'll give you the TSA as an example. I flew into Salt Lake City for the day to shoot a podcast with my co-host who has escaped to Utah. Okay, and it was fucking annoying. I was waiting in line, and I was waiting in line for a fucking hour. Okay, it sucked. And back in the day, I used to be like, man, fuck these guys. Like, these guys suck at their jobs. They're just like sitting around twiddling their thumbs, not doing a good job. Now I'm woke. I realize that it's not because of the individual employee that's like handling this insane amount of demand. It's that somewhere along the line, someone decided that we're going to need to do budget cuts and that we're not going to be able to open up the extra lines, right? Because we don't want to pay for the salaries of additional TSA employees at the time. Same with luggage handlers, right? Like anywhere where you experience as a consumer, anywhere you experience any sort of issue, our immediate inclination is that it's actually the fault of the individual workers who are fucking lazy, and that's wrong. That's just simply incorrect. It is directly because companies are corner cutting, cost cutting, and the most malleable aspect of commodity production always is going to be labor. So you cost cut by forcing 4 people to do the job of 8, especially when you can get away with it, especially when conditions have deteriorated and you're fearful that you might lose your job and then lose your fucking house or, not be able to pay rent anymore. The same principle holds for the federal government as well. TSA employees are already technically federal government employees anyway. That's why I use that as an example. Trump cut a bunch of TSA employees as well. I think it was like 300 or something. Really,
I like how it's ironic how MAGA says like these criminals are like taking our jobs, but really it's Donald Trump who's the criminal taking our jobs.
Yeah,
from federal employees, kind of crazy shit that's embarking on. I don't mean to like go into a whole socialism debate with you, but yeah, thanks for answering all my questions. Like, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no problem.
Hassan, I got a question.
All right, let's hear it.
So, it's been funny, okay? So, it's about every like 30 to 45 days, I'll check my Twitter DMs, and I'll see a new DM from you saying, "Pop out to LA and come on the show." And it's just been so funny because it's been happening for like 6 months, and at this point, I think it's hilarious. I'm no.
I told you next time you're in LA, hit me up. But you were like, "Oh, I'll come to LA even just for that alone." I was like,
"Yeah, bro, I'll pop on just for that."
I felt like that was too much pressure. I don't know where you live, but that's like.
It's not. Don't worry. I live in LA, so he'll come out and see me too.
Yeah, I got a $65 flight one way to LA from my local airport.
Hell yeah! What do you guys think about Jubilee, Straight Arrow News? That's my biggest gripe with Jubilee.
Oh my god, I hate their fact checking so much. It's the worst ever. Also, like I think what they did with Michael Knowles here recently was pretty negligent.
Do you guys know
on their behalf?
Straight Arrow News that presents itself as an impartial news outlet, like a fact checker, is actually owned by a fucking billionaire dude. I forget what his name is. Hold on, let me look this up real quick.
That's actually a crazy issue, man. I was literally on stream like bitching. I was like, I don't know if I'm tripping, but these fact checks are trash.
Are horrible.
Like,
I know, right?
I thought I was being dumb. I was like,
so the fact checks are right leaning.
Bro, the fact,
totally are.
And
okay,
they're always missing like incredibly important context. So they almost are purposely misleading. It's odd.
No,
I think those are ad reads almost. I almost think that they're ad reads.
It's weird.
So if you go on their website, the first thing that comes up on the commentary side is Dr. Frank Luntz. Do you guys know who that is?
Where do I know the name?
Oh yeah, that name sounds familiar.
He is a right-wing pollster, very famous right-wing pollster, and wears the ugliest toupee of all time. And also is responsible for, I don't know if you guys watched Vice, Adam McKay's movie Vice about Dick Cheney, but there's an entire segment dedicated to him. He's responsible for things like coming up with new ways of selling the Bush-Cheney administration's like insane proposals, like death tax.
Yep.
Yeah, that it used to be called estate tax, but now it's called death tax because of the likes of Frank Luntz. But beyond Frank Luntz, the entire